What in the world is happening with ESG? Hello, I'm James Vaccaro from the Climate Safe Lending Network. This month I'm going to be talking about the war of the words, this trialogue, the three-way conversation on ESG amongst its proponents and the criticism that it's getting from multiple sides. Let's first off start with a definition. Well, when you look at the environment and society and factors of what's happening in the world, you can look at it through two different lenses from a financial institution perspective. One is the single materiality, the financial risk and opportunity. In other words, to what extent do what's happening in the environment and society impact the bottom line of a company? Likewise, you can take the environmental impact, or the double materiality side, and say, well, what is it that that company is doing for the world, for the environment, for society? What is it that the positive benefits or the negative impact that it may have? And that leads to multiple strategies and worldviews about what you can therefore do in the field of ESG investment. So you might sort of say, well, actually, when you look at what a company does, if it's causing harm, that's going to come back on it. So in the middle there, you sort of say, well, the profit lens is equal to the purpose lens, that companies' ESG impacts on the world, whether they're negative or positive, are going to fully be reflected in those financial risks and benefits. And that's, in a way, classically the ESG narrative. So you sort of say that, well, ESG, it's a win-win, therefore. If you do good, it's green growth, you're doing well by doing good. Ultimately, all those impacts are going to result in financial consequences. However, if you look at from another lens and you were sort of saying, well, if there are things which are benefiting and there are companies in the universe which are actually benefiting from ESG factors, whether or not those companies are creating positive impacts for the world, then there's a critique that says, well, this is just greenwashing. This is part of a greenwashing agenda. It's distracting from the real changes we need to make in the world, because whilst those companies are profiting and being successful, they're not generating positive impacts necessarily and making the world a better place. Likewise, if you look at it through the other lens and look at some of the impact investors and sort of say, well, you might have a purpose above profit mindset, where when you're selecting for companies who create positive impacts for the world, even if those are not necessarily translated into financial profits or benefits, then there's a critique that says, well, that's all part of a distracting agenda from the financial needs which we have right now. The prime aim of financial products is to just make money. So there is this critique which is coming from both sides. All of the different parties are then looking at getting tons of data. So there's a whole sea of data which is being amassed, and like the psychologist Jonathan Haidt says, we may choose our worldviews emotionally, and then we select the data which best backs up our outcomes. So we say, look at my data, it proves me right. If I want to say that ESG creates outperformance, I will find the data for that. If it's underperformance, I will find examples of that. So what are the salient questions then for a bank, for financial institutions? I'd say that firstly, well, what are you really trying to achieve? What is it your clients really want? Are they aware of the distinctions and the choices that they're making when they're selecting a particular strategy? What are the capabilities needed to be effective for your chosen strategy? And in particular, what are the questions that you need to ask of that data? And what order are you going to do that in? That's not the whole extent of the complexities involved in selecting strategies which are going to be positive for environment, climate, or whatever, but it's a starting point and hopefully a way of making sense. As always, really happy to hear your views on this topic. Thanks very much.